You need to hear this because most people never see it coming. The moment you stopped pursuing them, they noticed right away, but not in the calm way anyone would expect. Not with relief, not with indifference, and not with silence in their mind. They noticed it with something sharper, something uncomfortable, something that sits in the background of their thoughts and does not leave easily. When you stop chasing, it does not feel like a small change to the other person. It feels like a shift in the entire emotional environment around them. The attention they were used to receiving is suddenly gone. The energy they expected from you is no longer there. And even if they act normal on the outside, something inside them reacts immediately. At first, they do not fully understand what is happening. They only feel a strange emptiness in moments where your presence used to exist. It is not always obvious. It shows up as restlessness, mild confusion, or a quiet discomfort they cannot explain. They may try to ignore it, but the mind does not easily ignore gaps where emotional attention used to be. That space you left behind starts to feel bigger over time. What once felt normal now feels different. They begin to notice your absence in small moments. A message that does not arrive. A call that does not happen. A reaction that is no longer there. These small details slowly build up in their awareness, even if they pretend they do not care. Inside their mind, something begins to shift. At first, it is subtle. They may tell themselves that nothing has changed, that everything is fine, that you will come back to your usual pattern. But the emotional system does not fully believe that. It starts to react before logic catches up. Your absence becomes a kind of reflection for them. It does not just represent distance, it reflects back their own thoughts, expectations, and assumptions. It makes them question things they were comfortable not questioning before. Things about attention, control, importance, and emotional security. As time passes, that silence becomes harder to ignore. The mind does not like unresolved emotional gaps. When something feels incomplete, it keeps returning to it. So they begin to think about you more often than they expected, not always intentionally but automatically, like thoughts that appear without permission. They start remembering small interactions. Simple conversations that did not seem important at the time now feel different in memory. They replay words, tones, expressions, and moments. Their mind tries to understand what changed and when it changed. But there is no clear answer, which makes it even more unsettling. This is where overthinking slowly begins. They try to create meaning out of your silence. They look for reasons. They analyze your behavior. They revisit old moments and reinterpret them in a new emotional light. What once felt simple now feels complicated because it is being viewed through the lens of loss and uncertainty. At the same time, another emotion starts to appear underneath everything else. It is not just confusion, it is not just curiosity. It is discomfort mixed with ego. Because your absence removes something they were used to having. Attention, validation, or emotional response is no longer easily available, and that creates an internal reaction they did not prepare for. They may not admit it even to themselves, but part of them begins to feel replaced or left behind. They imagine your life continuing without them. They picture you laughing, talking, meeting new people, and moving through your days without any visible struggle. That mental image creates a quiet, emotional pressure inside them. And then, something more complicated develops. They start questioning their own role in what happened. Did they misunderstand you? Did they take your presence for granted? Did they assume you would always stay available emotionally? These questions do not always come in a clear voice. They come as feelings of doubt that rise at unexpected times. Because of this, their emotional state becomes unstable in small ways. One moment they may feel detached, telling themselves it does not matter. The next moment, they may feel a strong urge to reach out or check on you. Then later, they may feel frustration or irritation without fully knowing why. This back and forth creates internal tension. The mind tries to restore control. It wants certainty. It wants clarity. But your silence does not give clarity. It gives space. And that space forces them to think more than they are used to thinking about the situation. The uncomfortable truth for them is that they cannot easily influence your attention anymore. The usual emotional patterns they relied on are no longer working the same way. This loss of influence creates resistance inside them, not always in a visible way, but in thoughts that grow stronger when things are quiet. They may begin to check small signs of you, not always directly, but indirectly. They notice activity, absence, patterns, timing, anything that could give them information. Their attention shifts toward details they would normally ignore, because now those details feel important. At the same time, memory becomes more active. The mind does not only remember facts, it remembers emotions attached to those facts. So they recall moments where they felt close to you, moments where they felt valued, and moments where they felt secure in your attention. Those memories feel stronger when the present feels uncertain. This contrast between past emotional comfort and present emotional distance creates inner conflict. They begin to compare what was with what is. And the difference between those two states creates emotional pressure that is not easy to ignore. As this continues, their thoughts may become repetitive. The same ideas return again and again. Why did things change? What caused the distance? Is it permanent? Can it be reversed? Should they act, or should they wait? This loop can continue without resolution because your silence does not provide answers. In this state, even small imagined scenarios become emotionally powerful. They picture you talking to someone else. They picture you being happy without them. They picture themselves losing access to your attention completely. These thoughts are not always rational, but they feel real in the moment they appear. And this is where emotional imbalance grows stronger. Because now, it is not just about missing you, it becomes about ego, uncertainty, fear of loss, and the discomfort of not being in control of the situation anymore. These emotions overlap and become difficult to separate. They may try to act normal outwardly, but internally there is tension. One part of them wants to reconnect, reach out, and restore what was there before. Another part resists, feeling pride, confusion, or fear of rejection. This internal split creates hesitation in behavior. Sometimes they may even act unpredictably. Small emotional reactions, sudden curiosity, or unexpected silence of their own. Not because they fully understand what they are feeling, but because the emotional system is trying to stabilize itself. What makes all of this more intense is that from your side, nothing dramatic was done. You simply stepped back. You stopped chasing. You stopped providing the same level of attention. But that simple shift creates a psychological reaction that is much stronger than people expect. Because absence is not empty to the mind. Absence is active. It forces interpretation. It forces reflection. It forces emotional processing that was not happening before. And when there is no closure, the mind keeps returning to it. Over time, they begin to notice even more things about you. The way you carry yourself. The way your energy seems different now. The way you are no longer emotionally predictable to them. These observations may feel small, but they build up internally. Each moment where you do not respond as expected adds another layer of uncertainty. Each delay, each silence, each absence becomes part of a bigger emotional pattern in their mind. They may not express it, but they feel it. And slowly, what started as simple absence turns into something they cannot easily ignore. Not because you are doing anything active, but because you are not. Because you are no longer filling the space they once took for granted. That is where the mind begins to struggle the most. Not in chaos, but in silence. Not in action, but in absence. And in that silence, they are forced to face thoughts they were not prepared to deal with. You need to hear this, because most people never see it coming. The moment you stopped pursuing them, they noticed right away. But not in the calm or simple way anyone might expect. Not with relief, not with indifference, and not with emotional silence. They noticed it in a sharper way, something that sits under the surface of their thoughts and refuses to disappear. When you stop chasing, it does not feel like a small change to them. It feels like something in the emotional background has shifted. The attention they were used to is no longer there. The energy they expected from you is missing. Even if they act normal on the outside, something inside them reacts immediately, without asking for permission. At first, they cannot fully explain what they are feeling. It shows up as discomfort in quiet moments. A strange sense that something is different. A subtle emptiness where your presence used to be part of their routine. They may try to ignore it, but the mind does not easily ignore emotional gaps once they appear. Over time, that space becomes more noticeable. What once felt normal now feels slightly off. They begin to notice your absence in small ways. A message that does not arrive. A reply that does not come as fast. A reaction that is no longer there at all. These details seem small, but they start building in their awareness. Slowly, their mind begins to adjust to this new pattern, even if they do not want it to. At first, they assume it is temporary. They assume things will go back to how they were. But uncertainty does not let the mind stay relaxed for long. It begins to question what has changed and why it feels different. Your absence becomes something they start to interpret. It is no longer just distance. It becomes a signal that their mind tries to understand. And when something is not clear, the human mind naturally starts filling in the blanks, even without full information. So they begin thinking more than before, not always on purpose. Sometimes it happens when they are doing nothing at all. A quiet moment becomes a moment where your memory appears. A normal situation reminds them of something you said or did. These thoughts come and go, but they become more frequent. They start remembering small interactions that once felt ordinary. Conversations that seem simple now feel slightly different in memory. Their mind replays words, tones, and moments, trying to find meaning in them. Trying to understand if something was missed or misunderstood. This is where overthinking slowly begins to form. The mind tries to connect pieces that may not even belong together. It searches for reasons behind your silence. It goes back to old moments and replays them with new emotion attached. Things that felt stable before now feel uncertain. At the same time, another feeling starts growing underneath the surface. It is not only confusion, it is also a mix of emotional discomfort and ego reaction. Because your absence removes something they were used to having. Attention, reassurance, or emotional availability is no longer guaranteed. And that creates an internal shift. They may not admit it openly, but part of them begins to feel the change in status. Not in a literal way, but emotionally. They start to sense that they no longer have the same influence over your attention. That realization can feel uncomfortable, even if it is not fully conscious. From there, imagination starts to fill the gaps. They begin to picture your life without them in it. You continuing your days, talking to others, laughing, moving forward, and not showing signs of struggle. These mental images are not always based on truth, but they feel real in the moment they appear. And those images create emotional reactions, not always dramatic, but noticeable inside them. A quiet mix of curiosity, discomfort, and comparison. They start to wonder where they stand in your life now, and whether their place has changed. This leads to self-questioning. They begin to think back on their own actions. Did they misunderstand you? Did they assume too much? Did they take your attention for granted? These thoughts do not come in a clear and logical flow. They appear as feelings of doubt that rise at unexpected times. Because of this, their emotional state becomes less stable. One moment they may feel detached and act like nothing matters. Another moment, they may feel the urge to reach out or check on you. Then later, they may feel frustration or confusion about why they are even thinking this much. This back and forth creates internal tension. The mind tries to regain control. It tries to find clarity. But your silence does not offer clear answers. It only creates space. And that space forces them to sit with thoughts they are not fully used to dealing with. The uncomfortable truth for them is that they cannot easily change your attention anymore. The old emotional patterns are no longer working in the same way. That loss of predictability creates resistance inside them. Not always visible, but present in their thinking, they may begin paying more attention to small details about you. Not in an obvious way, but quietly. They notice changes in timing, response, or absence. Things they once ignored now feel more meaningful because they are no longer certain about your position. At the same time, memory becomes stronger. The mind naturally remembers emotional moments more than neutral ones. So they recall times when things felt closer, easier, or more connected. These memories feel more intense when compared to the present distance. This contrast between past closeness and present uncertainty creates inner conflict. They compare what was familiar with what is happening now. And the difference between those two creates emotional pressure that is difficult to ignore completely. As this continues, thoughts may start repeating. The same questions return again and again. Why did things change? What caused the shift? Is this temporary? Is it permanent? Should they act or should they wait? These thoughts loop because there is no direct resolution from your side. Even small, imagined situations become emotionally significant. They picture you interacting with others. They picture you being fine without them. They picture themselves being left behind emotionally. These thoughts are not always logical, but they feel impactful. This is where emotional imbalance grows deeper. Because now it is not only about missing someone, it becomes a mix of uncertainty, ego sensitivity, fear of loss, and lack of control over the situation. These emotions overlap and become harder to separate. Outwardly, they may still appear calm. They may act as if nothing has changed, but internally, there is tension. One part of them wants to reconnect. Another part hesitates. Another part tries to protect pride. This internal division creates delay in their actions. Sometimes, they may show small signs of reaction. A message they almost send, a thought they almost act on, or sudden curiosity about what you are doing. These are not always planned actions. They are emotional responses trying to find balance. What makes this more intense is that from your side, the change may have been simple. You stepped back. You stopped chasing. You stopped giving the same level of attention. But that small shift creates a much larger internal response in them than expected. Because the mind does not treat absence as nothing. It treats absence as something to interpret, something to understand, something that feels incomplete until it is resolved. And when it is not resolved, it keeps returning to it. Over time, they begin noticing more about your independence, the way you continue your life, the way you seem less available emotionally, the way you no longer react the same way. These observations add up internally, even if they are not spoken. Each moment of silence from you becomes part of a larger mental pattern. Each unanswered message, each delay, each gap builds into uncertainty. And uncertainty is what keeps the mind active and searching. Slowly, what began as simple absence turns into something they think about more often than they expected. Not because you are doing something new, but because you are no longer doing what they were used to. That is where the mind starts to struggle. Not in noise, but in silence. Not in action, but in space. And in that space, they are forced to face thoughts they did not expect to deal with so deeply. And the longer the silence continues, the more the mind tries to understand it. Not always correctly, not always calmly, but persistently, because unresolved absence is something the human mind rarely ignores for long.